Have you ever noticed that as a team, when we're trying to set priorities, maybe not everyone agrees? Well, there's some behavior patterns going on underneath that is driving some of that conflict or disagreement. And having an understanding of what actually is going on beneath what you might be seeing is going to aid you in meeting them halfway so you guys can agree upon a priority and move on with your workday. So in this discussion, we're going to be leaning on the Eisenhower Matrix, where when you feel like you have to attack everything at once, you can use this matrix to really identify what is urgent and important right now to do and what can go on the back burner, can pause for a moment until tomorrow, next week, next quarter. So let's review the matrix just for a moment. The Eisenhower Matrix is a 4-quadrant matrix in which you prioritize if it's important. Or is it not important? That's what you have on your vertical axis. And then on the horizontal axis, you have, is this urgent or is this not urgent? Now you begin to place all the tasks and things that you want to prioritize that are on that to-do list, initiatives, the day-to-day operative things, and you begin to place them. Once they are placed, then you look at each quadrant. If it is less important but still urgent, you're going to delegate that out. Who would be the best to the task? If you're unsure about that, go ahead and check out the delegation based on DISC so you can align to people's natural work styles. The other category in the bottom half here in less important is less important and less urgent. So you're going to delete this. They're going to go to a parking lot where it's going to stay and die for a while, or into the unknown that people will find 5 years from now. The upper half is what we want to focus on. Any of those tasks, the to-dos or initiatives that are in the upper half, that's where you kind of want to start to address in a little more urgent manner. So if it's important and urgent, you're going to want to do these now. This is the steps and action owners, due dates that you want to talk about as a group. These are your priorities. And then important but less urgent, you're going to schedule out. Maybe that's tomorrow, next week, or next quarter. So this top half is really the important part that we're going to be focusing on. But now let's step into DISC. When you're looking at DISC on how they react to these important and urgent or important and less urgent type of decisions, they're going to have behaviors that interact with these priorities differently. And this is where some of that dysfunction or conflict might be coming up as you decide as a team what to focus on. The more you can acknowledge where people are at and where they naturally thrive, the easier things can get to actually execute the work. So these are our dominants, they're our reds. They want to prioritize speed. They want the results. They want decisions right now. They naturally will jump to urgent and important. They will even rush some things that aren't important into that category because they're fast. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's high quality or they're being methodical. They're thinking about a sustainable process through it. They just want to get it done because, again, they're focused on the results of getting it off the list. So some patterns you want to watch with these is creating that unnecessary urgency where they might think it's urgent, but it really doesn't have that much impact. They might think it's urgent, but you have more time than you think. So pausing and really evaluating that information is going to be important. They may skip the planning process because they want to jump to decisions pretty fast. They might be skipping steps that are necessary, maybe research, maybe contacting the client for more information, maybe creating a process flow so everyone knows what to do when. They're kind of your runners, your sprinters, so you're going to need to slow them down and just talk about how it's actually going to be executed so you can get that planning process in there. The other thing that they might be skipping over is relationships. Now, D-dominance work styles do care about relationships and they care about the results of those. But because they just want to get done, they might be a little bit more direct or disruptive in how they communicate this out. So a great question to ask to get high Ds to just pause as you establish priorities is, does this actually need immediate action? And then that will help them kind of recategorize in their mind what is urgent and important. Now, influence our eyes. These are our yellows, and they're a little bit more social and aware on the external variables of what's going on in this meeting. Body language, how people are communicating. They still want results. They still want to move fast, but they're a lot more socially aware of the effects of their next steps or decisions in prioritizing. So they're going to prioritize people. They're going to make sure everyone has a voice of their ideas. They're going to create the excitement about what is urgent and important. And so that means they can easily get pulled into other people's urgencies. So if you have a high D saying something that maybe isn't super important is important, a high I might jump on that train. They might say, yes, yes, I support you. And I like that you're having a voice here. And so they're actually jumping or getting pulled into other people's urgencies, which maybe they don't actually agree with on a more individual level. So patterns you want to watch with high I's, our social bunnies here, is they might say yes too often to get things moving, to make sure people aren't overloaded, disregarding their own capacity. They might be chasing very interesting things instead of the actual important or impactful things. They like shiny objects. So if it's new, if it's exciting, they might be thinking it is urgent and important when really maybe it doesn't have that much impact. They also will, because of how ideas are popping up in their head, they might have frequent interruptions with themselves or out to the group. So their mind is kind of jumping all over the place. So to pause, high I's, you're going to want to ask, is this your priority or is this someone else's? And then that will get them to pause for a moment and check, is this really urgent and important to me or just someone else? Now let's move on to our high S, our supportives. These are our greens. And they're a little bit more slow and methodical, but they're seeing those gaps. They're your background support team. These are the ones that you really want having the team pause for a moment to really evaluate the situation of what should be priorities. They will be prioritizing to help others, but also for stability. They'll see more of a bigger picture of how it all fits than just this very moment. So some patterns you might see is kind of similar to the high I's, just a little bit more methodical looking. They might delay their own work, their very important work, to make sure the team has what they want to move some of these priorities forward. So they might have an important piece of the puzzle and be doing it after hours, after core hours, or working through lunch because they're trying to get the other team members what they need to get their urgent and important priorities done. They also are most likely to not say no. Some of it's avoiding conflict, some of it's that people pleasing, but if it looks like team members are not jumping onto the task to what they should own, high S's often take on the task, which leads them to burnout because they're serving others more than themselves. So a great question to get high S people to pause is, what is important work to you that you have postponed because you were helping others? And then that will help them reestablish what is not only important and urgent to the team, but to themselves. High C's are compliance. Our blues, they are data and detailed. So they want to prioritize based on accuracy, based on quality, based on the most information available right now, because it's less risky. They love and live in preparation, in planning. So you can see where the natural conflict already comes out with high D's that want to skip those steps. So as the team talks about what's urgent and important, high D's, even high I's, will be jumping to conclusions and decisions, and high S and C's, a little bit more methodical, once to see the steps in the execution, are going to have different patterns coming out of what they need to execute the work. So high C's, you might see over-analyzing, asking questions that seem like they're not relevant, but they're trying to grasp information, data, resources, credibility. You might see some perfectionism, especially if decisions are moving fast, if priorities are shifting fairly quickly. They're trying to grasp at all the steps that are needed to de-risk the situation. And then you will also see them delaying action, kind of waiting for that certainty. So these are your reflectors, right? They need time to just like digest the information, gather any research that they need. So they might not want to make a priority decision in a one-sitting 30-minute meeting. This is why agendas are so important, because if you have an agenda and you prep some of these work styles that need a little bit more time to reflect on the whole picture and the pieces of the puzzle, then they're ready for the discussion and to make a decision in the meeting. This Eisenhower Matrix is a great priority framework to not only prioritize your day, but prioritize across teams of what we all need to be focusing on. But DISC explains the behavior patterns going on underneath during these discussions. It also creates an understanding of how different type of work styles can influence one another and support them so that they are honoring their energy and their capacity, instead of defaulting to habit, which leads you to dysfunction and conflict. Create understanding through DISC behavioral science to have an awareness and adjust to set each other up for success.